good for... Oh, hey man, how's it going? Can you hear it? I can't hear you, Troy.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, I got you now. Yeah, what's up?
Oh, not much.
Not much.
Well,
Enjoying another COVID lockdown?
yeah, it's awesome.
Mm,
Wouldn't miss it for anything.
Yeesh, so much COVID. I heard there's another wave
mm.
in the UK.
Everywhere, basically. Everywhere.
Omicron got a new DLC.
DLC. Oh my god. Yeah, until all these governments like coordinate some sort of response, it's just going to be like this for several hundred years.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Like even a coordinated response would work with the amount of people that just have their own ideas about what to do.
Well, so I'm saying it's almost impossible. I mean, you could do it. It would be very difficult, but it could happen. But nobody's going to listen anymore.
You can do it by force, basically, at this point, and
Correct.
that's not a good situation.
No.
Fuck it.
Right.
Um,
That's why I decided to move a little bit more remote because whatever, maybe I'll get a better view.
Okay, so we were gonna cover provenance tracing for 1,000 items.
Yes.
And so the situation is that making an accounting system that doesn't actually count numbers, but instead counts things.
You mean sets, right?
I don't know if I mean that. What do you mean sets?
Well, I mean, the basic term for most arithmetic, which is pretty much all of math, is set theory. Like, you have a set of things, and that
Right.
could make and then when you set up that arithmetic, that set could be 2 or 8 or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but it's a set. And then there's sets within sets, and then
Right, but the sort of the architectural difference is not storing a record that stores a number representing your stock. It is a system that stores an object for each piece of stock and then counts the stock literally by counting the objects. So I don't really. I mean, it seemed like it was an object-based accounting system, but it's just the distinction between recording a number and recording a thing, and then doing things with the sets of things, doing operations on the sets of things, as opposed to having numbers. Like I have 5 T-shirts is radically different from I have these 5 objects that represent T-shirts, and now I'm going to do my accounting on those objects.
right, that's a set. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, what I wanted to try and cover was I wanted to bounce some of the architectural ideas off of you, Ben, and see if they made sense, and also talk about some of the value assumptions that I was making, such as like if I look at a system like SAP, it's like it is primarily a number-based accounting system. It counts the number of items you have. It does not represent objects. If I want to class an object in the supply chain or pull that.
Oh, wow, you just went evil. What happened there?
Yeah, your audio's a bit
Yeah.
like almost indecipherable.
It's been 20 years since my computer got dropped in a train by April, so I don't know how to fix it. Hey, I also lost the
Now you're a robot.
keyboard. Yeah. So
You went from. Oh, there you go.
yeah. Okay. Great. One of those things called a nuisance problem that I'll never get around to fixing. So when I think of a system like SAP, it's a number-based accounting system. I don't know exactly what the term is for that type of system. Definitely, the system we're trying to make is object-based accounting, but I think the term for how SAP was made would be a a relational accounting system, where they store relationships between numbers of items and they store relationships about properties of items. But
Yeah.
you, because of the because of the I guess the philosophy of relational data,
Hmm.
you can't pick it up and move it somewhere because it's made of relationships. So
Yeah.
you can't uplift it, and it's not transportable because it is relationships. You can't transport relationships.
Right. It's like you can do it, but only by moving all of the things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And when you do it,
Like,
you break relationships because now you cross a firewall, and now
right.
you lose the connectivity or the liveliness of the relationships. And so, one of my assumptions in saying, well, you should build this if you ever want to do. Fuck, sorry for being fuzzy. The the long term the long term economic shift I'm trying to hit is that transparent supply chain is definitely the future. I've spoken
Hmm.
to a couple of factories in China. One of them was I was very lucky to sit down with the CEO of a $150 million fabric company over there, and she was like 100% transparent supply chain is the future. Like they knew that it was coming. They have auditors all the time coming from their downstream customers wanting to audit their process, and she's like, yeah, look, we're definitely going transparent. At the same time, they had a team of about, I think it was up to 20 software devs in that factory trying to make a custom Oracle-based database to track all this stuff.
Oh
And
boy.
and right, and her opinions of that team and that product and that outcome were bad. Were like, this is the CEO paying for it, watching this thing happen, and just like shaking her head like, this is, I hate this, but
This,
having, I assume, no other option.
I think this is sort of the motivating, um, like background behind what they used to call Web3, right? It was like the semantic web, like having like a protocol layer agreement about what objects are that allows you to like extract them from their context and like makes them more portable between
Yeah, but they did it in
like
a bullshit
different.
way. They did it in a bullshit way. They said, let's make it more portable by making it one large database. Like, that doesn't
Right.
solve the problem,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
that made a different problem. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, it works. Okay, if everyone ran the same copy of SAP, maybe that would work. But that's not the fix I want.
Right. It's like what they were originally trying to do there, I think, is like just get everybody to agree that like this type of thing is this type of thing. And then you have this like whole problem of like people view the world differently and the taxonomies would be different depending on your point of view. And like I think that's why like semantic web was kind of intractable. Um, like definitely having a universal addressing scheme would like help make things semantic in a way that you could never get by just putting a label on a data object and saying like this type of object is this thing and we all agree and that's what makes it portable between systems. On some level there's like a social kind of agreement factor involved, I think, no matter what, that like when we look at this thing we see the same thing. um, anyway, I can tell I'm kind of diverting off course a bit here.
I don't know that you are, and I don't know exactly what the right course is. Um, let me continue waffling. Maybe
Yeah.
it will become clear. So I'm I'm making the assumption that transparent supply chain is the future of supply chain.
Mhm.
I'm making the assumption that individual object tracking from cradle to grave is the future of supply chain. Um,
When you say
I'm
transparent, what do you mean by that exactly? Do you mean just that it's on the blockchain and everybody can see it and audit it? Is that what you mean by transparent? Or is there some other term for transparency that I'm not
That's a
seeing?
good question because that is a very fuzzy and loose definition. To me, it means possibly transparent, everything from full transparency down to nothing, or gradients of transparency. At the moment, if you want it, you can't have it. But in the system I imagine, if you want it, you can have it. It just depends on the agreements you make with your suppliers. So I do not want to come across like I'm trying to force supply chain transparency on anyone, but a more acute way to state the gamble that I want to take is that those suppliers who can offer their downstream members transparency of their supply chain will win more business than those that cannot.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's very, very accurate. I think um, I think the way that a lot of them will think about it is like I can either swallow the cost of providing as much like specious access into my process as anyone demands in order
Right.
to like assure them that they're not taking a risk by using me, or I can just provide that information forward as far as anybody needs it, and like nobody will ever need to audit me, kind of thing.
So the system I would like to provide is one that occupies the space between the suppliers in the supply chain. And that is to say that instead of trying to vend a system that's intended to run internally within a company, which is how the majority of the supply chain management software is currently vended, I want to vend at the interfaces. And I want to vend it. The business model I want to vend upon is I want to make service as a software so that like the software is free, but you pay for the service you get by using that software. So for example, at the interfaces, if you actually have the software that operates and tracks and manages that interface, you have the beginnings of a marketplace. You can give away the software for free so that I don't need to give specious access into my database when I'm 3 steps down the chain. I'm just like, this system is open to all. Why don't you just start using it? Right? And it doesn't cost you anything until you want to start making deals or changing the supply chain from a chain into a graph. Because when it reaches a graph, it becomes a marketplace at the interfaces. The marketplace is already there. I just want to mechanize it and take a skim.
A graph like a sorry, so I think we're losing macro and micro perspective a little bit
Okay.
in your framing there. Like when you say graph, you could mean like multiple people like going through multiple transformation processes all in one common space, which I know is probably what you're talking about trying to address. But
Specifically, the kind of graph I meant was a
like a
direct,
DAG.
yeah, a DAG, definitely a DAG.
Yeah.
But I just like, I think like supply chain is used as a model of how the supply systems work because the graph-like nature of supply chain is so cumbersome. Like it's actually hard to change your suppliers that redirecting or reshaping your chain is a painful process and doesn't happen very often. It should be very fluid. So it should actually look like this very dynamic DAG that can recompose based on environmental parameters like supply chain shocks, right, or anything like that. But at the moment, it's very rigid, and it ran great while there was no disturbance. But disturbances are here, and they're going to just keep coming. It seems.
Yeah, I
What
mean you don't need to look any further than the existence of like so much vertical integration to sort of realize that there's a strong incentive to lock down like and thin out supply chains, like to make them less fat, less swappable, less graph like, more linear, more linked list like.
I don't understand what vertical integration means.
Vertical integration, like it's massively profitable for a company to own every step of the supply process.
Oh, and you're saying that's generally bad?
I think it's very harmful to society.
Okay.
It's harmful to society, great for the company. It's rent seeking at a macro scale. So
But like in a system where it was efficient to swap like chunks of the supply chain out under shock, like you're talking about, I think it would limit the ability to vertically integrate, basically.
It wouldn't make sense. I guess it would make economic sense to try and vertically integrate if the swappability was something you wanted, like it was actually a feature, because the people who can be composable like that will outpace those that are rigidly locked and suffer some kind of detriment to that lock.
Right. Like you would, you have two choices as a company that wants to vertically integrate. You either need to be able to control all of the horizontal swapping that could happen at any given layer of the supply chain, which is like cumbersome, probably because it's already cumbersome to try and capture just one forward chunk. Imagine trying to capture 8 parallel forward chunks in the same role.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the SAP style system, even if you try to deploy it against a vertically integrated supply chain, it starts to get very unwieldy under the weight of the transaction load and the complications that occur in a system that was made more
oh, you're
focused on.
cutting out again, Tom. Your audio's
Yeah.
gone.
Hang on a second.
Oh, there you are.
How about now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me. Okay, now I don't know. I just changed my audio feed. I don't know if that's still actually occurring in this stream, so let me just check it.
You sound fine now, so.
Yeah, but the way that OBS pulls in its audio stream is what I'm worried about. Let me just grace you with a massive feedback loop.
Fine.
Here, I'll mute.
No, we're good. Okay. What I was saying was that in a vertically integrated piece of supply chain, an SAP style system starts to groan under the weight, and it becomes very complex and expensive to run, and then you also can't really break off bits of it to even vertically deintegrate. What I'm trying to lead up to is that I want to make absolutely sure that undertaking the construction of an object-based supply chain system is founded upon a solid value offering, and that value offering hinges upon the assumption that going from a relational supply chain management software such as SAP will be impossible to retrofit to become object-oriented, and SAP will need to be rewritten if they want to move to individual item tracking with portability up and down the supply chain. Is that correct?
Yeah, right. Because this is just like down to like fungibility of items in the inventory, right? Like it's not possible for an item in an SAP inventory to be non-fungible.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be, but you would have to create an entirely new inventory item for every single item that you made. Like
so probably
the overhead.
a good name would be a non-fungible accounting system, because all the other accounting systems are by design fungible.
Or they're as fungible as the people running the systems are lazy, right? I imagine there's probably an ability to scan serial codes in any SAP inventory and then speak more in terms of categories.
There is. So Troy, medical devices, individual identification marks on them. Is that how are those tracked?
Critical. Like, it depends on the device and the manufacturer. Some manufacturers, you always have to have your device code on there on the product. So on the label, that has to be there, and it has to be, you have to be able to scan it with a barcode. So, and depending on what market you're selling it in is the way that those numbers are assigned, and you have to buy them usually in bulk from a supplier that will sell you the numbers.
Oh, you can't. So you got to buy individual codes.
Correct. So basically, what happens is that you go to a supplier that supplies these numbers, and you say, "I have this object, and it's being sold in packs of 12, and it's this big, and it has this much volume. Please give me numbers for 100 batch of 100 for these, so that I can now give a product code that's now trackable worldwide, and everybody would know exactly where that number is and what it means when they scan it."
Is that the UAC system?
Forget the actual name, but
something like that, right?
No, it's not the UAC system. It's specifically for medical manufacturing.
Okay, all right.
So
I guess.
But I mean, every like Bond, SAP, Odoo, they all have these same sort of issues with traceability. Like how do you label something based on how, with the raw material that came in, how it was manufactured, how it was packaged, how many cartons were put into a box, how many boxes were put into a bigger box, how many those boxes are put into a container, how many containers are put on a ship. All that stuff has to be tracked for the supply chain.
Right, and so for us, what I'm pondering doing is making a system that's object first.
Yeah, so large object management, right? Like we talked about.
Like large numbers of objects.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. I feel like, what questions would I ask if I knew more about this?
So the first thing that occurs to me, I've thought about it a little bit here. Like, is there any solution that could do better than a serial code on a product? Like,
yeah,
at the end of the day,
we know that the ultimate is going to be ambient identification, whereby a phone camera can look at the item and can, using image recognition, guarantee you 100% recognition, and so you no longer need a proxy for identity in terms of codes. We don't have that. We're probably a few years off that. So,
well, I mean, we sort of do, but we don't. Like, it doesn't do ID by just looking at it and saying here's what it is via some AI algorithm. It's barcode. It's barcodes right now. So it's got these small 2D postage stamp barcodes on things, and it scans it and tells you exactly what it is, where it came from, what the manufacturing date is, what the expiration date is, all that stuff.
Right.
Even the website it goes to for complaints and handling and all that stuff.
Yeah. And so the model of the system I want to make is that anyone can generate these codes, and then I envisage a set of tools that can allow you to annotate with information in ways that people can reuse or add to at whim. So, like, as a customer, I bought a towel. It has a 2D barcode on it. I scan the 2D barcode. I can then add comments about that thing. Like, I'm purposely trying to design the system in a way that it's not owned. It's participant owned, as opposed to turn up here to buy your unique code. It's like, well, we can guarantee uniqueness with the cryptography of the keys, so we don't need that piece.
Okay, so then the next problem you're going to run into is forgery.
Yes, but that is solved and not solved in the same way that any kind of provenance tracking is, in that if I receive something that's forged and I look it up on website that tracks these things, because I think it was like a Gucci towel. Turns out it's like a Gucci towel with one C. I will be able to see that the provenance was not handed to me correctly.
Right.
Okay, so should we just like run through an example in your head as to what you?
Sure.
I mean, I got an idea what I think you're talking about from a manufacturing perspective, but I'd like to hear what you think this looks like via blockchain.
Okay, cool.
So
the exact case in point is manufacture of towels. So the sales volume is estimated at around about 1 million towels a month, and to begin object tracking of each towel, the current idea is to put a 2D barcode on the care label of the towel, because it can be sewn in, which means it will survive multiple washes. So the identifier should be recoverable for like several years of use. The idea is that any issues that arise in that towel, we have the traceability of the individual towel through whatever factories it came from that allow higher levels of QA to be delivered, I guess.
okay, so you're speaking from a customer standpoint. I'm talking about from a raw material standpoint. So, like, are we talking about like, okay, I assign the raw material, the raw cotton, if you will, for this towel, a bulk blockchain number where then I can break that apart into smaller chains?
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. The way that I see the system integrating with the existing supply chain. Okay, no one's going to buy new systems or change anything like that, and I want to make the system graciously introducible. So the premise that I'm pushing, why? Because I mean, this isn't going to be cheap, but the thing that I'm pushing, why it's essential to do now, is because if you don't start your business with individual object tracking at its core, switching to it will never happen because it's just too hard. Do you guys think that is a valid assumption to promote to people?
Of course, because that's not how these systems are written. None of these systems are written like that.
Right.
They can't. Right. You can't retool SAP. You can't retool Bond. No. You can't retool Odoo to be blockchain. It doesn't work. I don't even think you could even put a sub-layer on top of it and call it blockchain. You know, you might be able to do that at the output where the item is already manufactured and then you assign it some sort of barcode / and then that's all tracked via blockchain for accounting purposes. You know, like where it went, how it went, who was sold to, and how many. That could all be done on blockchain, but that you can't do that from raw, from like, you know, art to part. That has to be.
That's a fucking great saying, dude.
From art to part.
From art to part, yeah.
Oh, that's old school engineering, man. We've been saying that for years. But I mean, can I explain to you what I think you want?
Sure.
So from an engineering standpoint, I would see this as being this. Let's say I have a big block of aluminum and I want to make a bunch of widgets with it, right?
Yeah.
And I know how many widgets I can make out of this block of aluminum. Okay, so I buy this block of aluminum and I give it NFA, right?
Yeah.
And that NFA is divisible by a certain number of widgets that I can get out of this block. So then I pull out, I make this block, and in my system, I cut it up into like 1,000 NFAs. That means I get 1,000 widgets.
Yep.
And then that goes to some sort of manufacturing process, and that manufacturing process itself is an NFA. So when the NFA comes in from the raw material and it meets the NFA of the manufacturing process, those merge and make a new NFA that is the product widget, right? And then that NFA then goes to maybe some other step where it has to get some other process done to it, finishing or whatnot. And that's a merge process from manufacturing NFA again to the new product coming in. And then from so on all the way up to where you're wrapping it, packaging it, putting a stamp on it, and then sending it out the door. All that stuff could be NFA merges all the way up to the The top of the food chain.
Wait, forks and merges. So the billet coming in, the aluminium billet, comes in as one NFA and it forks into...
Correct. Right. I just wasn't using that terminology. I'm just saying however you want to break it up.
Yeah,
however you want to fork it, branch it.
The provenance of any given point can be traced all the way up to its parent item. The billet should be traceable back to the bauxite mine. All that stuff should be available there.
Right. At that point, now, what we can say is that some of this code that we're writing and this tooling that we're doing can sit on top of this stuff at every single step. So it could integrate into an existing structure where it would be at the manufacturing phase. Every time it goes through this, it becomes the NFA, and that's how you read it for that particular chunk of code. And at some point, maybe they turn off their SAP system because they don't need to use it anymore.
Right.
Now, I think you're going to have some issues with transparency, but that's just, again, how some of these businesses make money. They're protective of their supply chains because that's how they...
Yeah. So the system needs to be able to be turned on or off so that you can select whichever level of transparency you're comfortable with for now. I don't want to be making a stand that you have to be transparent fully or you can't use the system.
I know. I'm just saying that because how Walmart works, they make you use their internal system, and then once you're in and you have this huge order of, like, say, $8 million worth of widgets or towels, they go, "Oh, that's great. We loved it. We went through those things in 3 months. We want to order some more. But now that we know how your system works, we know that you can sell it to us for $2 rather than $8."
Yeah.
And that's how they do it. That's how they make their money. They lean on their suppliers heavily, hard. And you don't have any choice because now you're stuck into it. You're like this mafia where, if you don't do it, your business goes under because they're really your only place that you're purchasing is through them. You can't sell to anybody else because you're under contract with them. So your business goes under, and it happens a lot to small businesses. It ruins small businesses like that.
Right.
Amazon does it too. So.
Right. But there's a lot of gambles going on here, right? But one of them is that consumers will start to want to see more how their supply chain worked.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everyone's going to want their conflict-free, hand towels, right?
Yeah, right. Like, I don't want blood diamond underwear. Like, I'll pay more, but I just don't want someone to have been screwed.
Yeah. People don't want their Uyghur stuff, from China. You want to make sure that it didn't come from that particular area.
Right.
And how are these suppliers going to do any of that kind of auditing without this sort of system where it could be tracked down to the milligram of raw material?
Down to the item, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yes, that's the system I want to make. I guess I wanted to talk about it in terms of how to integrate it gently and gradually into an existing supply chain world. And the angle I'm pushing with why should this company do this thing now is I'm like, you can't do it later because you need to start with it, and the transparency won't be very far. It'll be like, once it comes to you have these individual traces. Once it gets sold through the retailer, they're going to destroy information by assigning a barcode to it where the barcodes are fungible. And maybe if there's an error, the fungibility will be removed when we would go to do QA on the item. Or for a consumer that's conscientious enough, they would reconnect back with these systems to be able to remove the fungibility or undo the fungibility that was placed upon the item.
Why do we want to remove that?
I don't want to, but the retailers, for example, are not going to change how their checkouts work to handle non-fungible goods. They're going to continue using barcodes for at least the next decade.
I don't see a conflict there, though. That's my point.
Right. I'm just talking about I want to make sure that I'm not promoting bullshit where I'm like, if you don't start with it internally to your company, you'll never get there. And here's our plan for expanding up and down your supply chain wherever anyone else is willing and sees an advantage.
Yeah, well, I see this as a phantom system, though. It doesn't hurt anybody by it being there. It's accessible to anybody at any point because they can audit it on the thing, right?
Yeah.
But I don't see how you'd have to destroy fungibility at any moment, because if a retailer doesn't use it, they don't use it. If they scan the barcode,
but they destroyed the fungibility when they put it through their barcoding system, because they basically treated the whole box of towels as interchangeable and then sold them. So when they actually give back sales data of like, we sold 15,000 towels at this weekend at this store, they give that back to the suppliers so that they can balance warehouse loads and timing and all that. That's where the fungibility is introduced back. So we have to guess and take a probability of which towel you got on any given day until you scan that barcode again.
I would, something comes to mind here just based on conversations I had with my dad, who used SAP, who was a maintenance manager at a cement plant, who like had to keep a certain amount of inventory. Honestly, wanted to keep less of it because there's a cost to carrying an inventory, right?
Oh, huge cost, massive.
I think that one of the faulty assumptions here is that that fungibility is not useful. Let me try and explain what I mean. I think like, you don't care about the gear that you're putting into a big machine in the plant, like what its unique properties are as an individual gear. You care that it fills the role that the gear is supposed to fill in the machine. The only time you care about its uniqueness is when it fucking breaks. And that's when you need to go and figure out whose fault it was and like how they're going to pay for it, right? Like up until the moment where there's an exception, you treat it by category rather than treating it by like unique identity, which is probably why the accounting systems work the way they do. You're not interested in, I think it's the same thing for retailers too, right? Like I care much more about the unique provenance of shrinkage than I do about the unique provenance of all the stuff that people bought. That like, they got their individual item, they might care about the properties of that individual item. But when I was carrying it and selling it, like it really didn't matter to me.
Well, it matters to the retailer in terms of stock though, right?
Right. What I mean is like when I carry mine, I choose the inventory I want to carry as a maintenance manager of a cement plant. I'm deciding like how many. There's some really standard kind of fixes that you need to do, like buckets and bucket elevators. There's like 10,000 of them in the plant.
So what? I don't quite get what you're.
He's saying I guess he's saying that the gear doesn't matter until we need to know where it came from and who made it and who's responsible for repairs.
Until there's an exception, you mean?
Yeah. Provenance doesn't matter except an exception.
Why not have it all the way through though? Like if it matters at some point, why not have it?
Because
I think that's a valid perspective for sure.
I think we all agree with that.
Yeah, and I guess like this concept's it's fuzzy, right? So I'm trying to juggle where does the line go around what we care about and what we don't, right? But if you have non-fungibility of all the items within your plant, then you can overload the accounting system with extra functionality. Like it can now be the maintenance. It can now have a module that does maintenance tracking. Like this particular gear has done this many million revolutions and it's due for replacement in X, right? Like there should only be one record of non-fungibility within a company, because it's insane to have these overlapping systems that are all talking about the same stuff, but because it was made fungible when it was entered, you can't say for sure, so you need a different system.
But I mean, yeah, you bring up another really interesting point there is like when I talk about the plant itself and its ability to operate, like I might treat that as something that's not fungible even when I swap the components inside of it out, right? So like I don't like from the perspective of the whole plant, like the individual gear doesn't really matter. From the perspective of the individual gear being a maintainable thing, like you want to count the number of revolutions. You want to try and get a sense of its life cycle, right? But
Yeah,
from
yeah,
the perspective of the whole,
so when I'm that gear is not just an inanimate thing. As soon as I start to care about its duty cycle, I have now annotated it with extra information. That information should all be stored with the digital representation of the gear object.
Mhm.
It shouldn't be in these siloed systems. The silo should be encapsulated in the object, not
Mhm.
in the use case for the information of the object.
But that's also not really the way that the mental model of, if the gear is driving a kiln, let's say,
Yeah.
like I actually don't care about like once the kiln is moving, like I might be tracking the gear and its wear and its amount of revolutions and whatever, but from the perspective of the kiln, it just needs a thing with category gear in it, right? Like I need to there's a missing feature from the NFAs that you're describing. They need to be able to reference things but not individual things. They need to be able to reference things by category.
So I want a thing of class gear, and so
Right.
long as it fills the API of gear, that's good enough.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's the difference. It's totally the difference between class and object.
Class and instance.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any. I don't see any difficulty because then we've just mapped the accounting processes within the company to our programming concepts, which is easy.
Well, what you're saying though, Tom, is that you want to make a ghost phantom factory. Taking Ben's example, you want to create a ghost phantom factory of NFAs that mimic what's happening in the real life.
Yes.
Because right now, the accounting systems only mimic what things get pushed and pulled inside the system based on scanning and barcodes and data entry inside the system.
Yep.
But if you're using NFAs, and if you say I installed this NFA into this system, this API or whatever, and I also did it in real life, and and I turned on the NFAs and I'm turning on the gear, then theoretically you could program it where it says as long as this gear is running, and the computer would know that because it's tracking what's happening on the floor, it would know when it was time to replace it. The NFA would know when it was time to replace it and could send you an alert. And accounting systems can't really do that. They can do that to some extent, but it's not that easy. You still need to go and measure oil and take chemistry of the oil and figure out what's wearing down and all that stuff. I mean, it's still pretty intrusive in terms of being able to get in there and figure out what's really going on. I mean, of course, you can take oil samples while these machines are running. A lot of people do that, but yeah, I mean, you would know this for any type of machine, for anything that you replaced or repaired or anything.
I'm glad you brought up oil because oil and primary resources are another like interesting piece of the puzzle here. Because like there are some things that will resist being described as non-fungible because of their physical nature.
Like for instance, the consumption of lubricants in a factory line.
Yeah, or primary resources. So like before I've turned it into a cube of aluminum, I have just a crap load of aluminum ore, and I'm assuming I'm not indexing rocks.
Yeah, you are.
Or are you?
Well, yeah, you are because you so the way that you track, like you can track bauxite mines by the volume of material removed, and the proven reserves are measured by sort of calculating the containing box, and then when it gets scraped out, you can model how much cubic meterage was removed, and you have the tonnage of the process, the grade, so you can definitely quantize on whatever it makes sense to. Like, it's not just we don't know, it's like it's something, and it
Right.
basically where you draw the line depends on when does the effort of accounting for it cost more than the value that you get from tracking it. That's
Yeah, well, that makes sense. You don't want to index anything that's more expensive than like you make for selling the thing.
yeah. Okay, so how to make this system?
So I think like forking and merging. First of all, I'm not actually sure merging is that useful of an operation. Merging is like if I'm going to bake a bread, and you can't you can't consider those pieces separate anymore. Like they're kind of fused. But I
Right.
think
So the
referencing.
majority of um, the flow of materials in a supply chain is an increasing amount of division. Like merge is not a common operation.
It is, but it's like when you build an assembly, you don't really merge it in the same way that if you think of splitting an aluminum cube into like 1,000 tiny aluminum cubes is a
Right.
fork.
Right, but I
Like
guess if you start to consider past the point of sale and along the sort of the sunset of a product, merge starts to make sense if you want to like recover the scrap metal from a machine. You know, like that's a merge for sure.
right. I would argue that the vast majority of operations in a supply chain are like by reference. Like I'm
Forks.
building a thing out of smaller pieces.
Yeah.
Presumably, actually, it's better for the economy if more assemblies had swappable pieces.
Yep.
Like,
Definitely.
it's the same. It's the same kind of thing. Like a vertical supply chain results in an Apple product that I can't take apart. It's literally like insane to try and fix something in your Apple laptop.
Okay,
But like, okay, go ahead.
okay, so yeah. My mind's getting blown here with the fact that these aren't merges. So, if I'm taking two component A and component B, and I'm using through C to put them together, and I make a brand new NFA object, then what is that process? Then, if it's not merging, am I
That
missing something?
that's wrapping. That's
It's
wrapping.
reference.
Wrapping. All right. Okay.
Yeah,
So that's fine.
it's composition, object composition, basically.
All right, that's fine. I just want to make sure I know what language we're using. So
Merging.
wrapping's fine. I'm cool with wrap. Very familiar with wrapping, especially with assets and whatnot. So that's fine. I just want to make sure that we're all speaking the same.
Functions actually merge the non-fungibility of the items.
When you're saying merge, is like that's destroying information?
It is destroying
then?
information, and it is
Okay.
used to reflect a similar operation that occurred in the real world. Like if I take a bag of PET plastic and recycle it, that is a merge because I can no longer distinguish the component bottles that came into it. But if each bottle had an individual identifier on it, I would have known what those objects were before they reached the smelter.
Right. And if you're merging two lines of code, like two branches of code,
Yeah.
you're losing their distinctness as branches. Like
Yeah.
you keep the information about what happened in what order, but you're losing their separateness.
So is merging increasing or decreasing entropy then?
Merging is increasing entropy.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Forking is decreasing entropy and increasing order in the world.
Right.
So the reason I like this idea of like reference inside of NFAs is like you can start to think about the composition of something by identity and by category. Like you can think of the pieces by class, or you can think of them by instance.
Yes.
Which is how you get like a factory where I can conceive of the operation of swapping this gear out for another gear, even though that individual gear I might care about its unique individual provenance if it busted and I need to go and try and shake someone down for money for it.
Yep. You would also care about the provenance if you needed to replace the gear, but you really want to be able to replace it by intellectual property only. So you're like, I have the designs for this gear, I have everything to do with it. That's part of what I bought when I purchased it. And now, so long as I have a compliant manufacturer, I should be able to receive an equivalent part without having to go back to the exact gear manufacturer.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And I think like that blueprint information is the category information.
Yes,
Like
that is the part of the separating the intellectual property out from the items. That's where we're trying to manage the royalty streams for the intellectual property separately from the royalty streams for the materials. That's sort of the Dreamcatcher separation, is that the knowledge work should all be completely material free. And then when it is encapsulated into materials, that's a different set of rules that occur for the commerce of those items. Whereas right now, the intellectual property is all bundled up in the material items, and the scarcity of the physical material is used as a mechanism to extract revenue for the intellectual property. But we're trying to split those.
yeah, that makes sense.
We want to split the art from the part.
All right.
It does beg the question, if you're going to introduce the idea of like a category interface for an object, are you introducing the idea of inheritance?
I'm pretty sure you are. Can you elaborate more on what you're asking though?
Well,
Because like that would be a
it
shop.
just seems
A category is a shop.
right. It just really seems like we're walking the entire history of object-oriented programming right now.
Well, pretty much like that. Well, because that's where what it was intended to do. Because modeling the world in relationships is a nightmare. The world
Right.
works in objects to our minds. Like, I don't know why, but it just so happens to be. So why are we stuck with accounting systems that are relationship based?
Right. So if you end up with like a class interface to an object, so if you end up with an object in an NFA that you can like consider by the category or by the instance, I guess, like you can also have relationships between categories of things. So,
Yeah.
I think like NFAs would have types, and then the types would be, there would be more abstract and more concrete types of things, right?
There'd be
Like an
NFA
animal.
sets. So there's sets of NFAs. I think that's what we're still getting around set theory. Everything we're describing here is set theory. So just make sure you Google that when we're done with this call.
Mhm. What it seems like to me is that like there's probably some interesting stuff to be mined from thinking about class inheritance in relationship like with fungibility of these assets.
Okay, I
Like,
guess the driving principle though is to make a software system that mimics the real world transformations as closely as possible to avoid the
Yep, that's correct.
And the purpose being, and I don't know how to calculate this saving, but the purpose being to reduce the number of virtual efforts or transformational efforts that are required simply because you lost track of what the thing was in the real world. Like you have accountants running accounting and they're working in an entirely disjoint manner from the actual things themselves that you're talking about. And then now you need an auditor because the accounts, you're not sure if they match the real world anymore. And then they went through a bunch of other transformations and now you're even less sure, right? And so whilst it's more effort to track each individual item or each process individually, I'm sure that once it gets done, I'd like a way to express the benefits that could be had from not ever losing fungibility. Like how do you present the cost savings to a business for it takes more effort to hold fungibility throughout, right?
right.
To hold non-fungibility throughout. But I want a way to present the business case for, okay, all this stuff that you think you have to do is actually rooted in the fact that you made everything fungible.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So I think like what I'm trying to drive at is like I think you'll find it very you'll probably find a lot of resistance in physical goods manufacturing industries to like explaining the idea that they have to keep track of every single like individual thing. I know the system is going to keep track of it for them, but
Well,
like if you try to explain that
some of
that's
them
what it's
already have
doing.
that. Some of them already have that, and then they actually destroy that information when they ship the goods. Because so one of the factories I went to in China has a system called the Eaton manufacturing system, where each hook. So they were making duvet covers, towels. I think a Spider-Man costume. I saw that moving around the factory. Each hook in the conveyor system has a unique code, and so the item is tracked by this code all the way through the factory. So they already have a lot of this stuff there, and then they package it up in boxes and then delete the data in effect. Right? So we're
Right.
trying to hold that data all the way through the supply chain.
Right. But there's going to be like just on a human level, if I'm a purchaser and you're a supplier, like
Yeah.
when I go to make that contract with you, like you don't have to delete that data, but you seriously cannot represent it all to me. Like you can't give me the whole provenance data of all of it during the negotiation because like I might be interested in having that data in the event of an exception or a failure, but mostly I'm interested in like what does your product or widget do for me in the abstract, right?
I don't get
Like
why a manufacturer. I mean, okay, sure, we'll test it with a manufacturer, but why would they resist that?
because they care about what they're buying because of the role that it fulfills in their system and their needs.
Yeah.
They don't care about like the unique individual properties of every single piece in every single box, right? Like they slot that into their system by the role that it fills.
Right.
So the interface between you and me is very much talking about um, not individual things, but needs and like how those needs are fulfilled by like specifications, roles, like objects that fit into a category, right? When I'm talking to you as my supplier, I'm talking to you about what category of things I need, not what individual things I need.
Right. And then I supply you with things, and I supply you with the individual identifying information of
Yeah.
them. That's
Right.
the relationship that we're trying to push upstream to these suppliers.
Right. And that's great for me as a purchaser because now I can, when something's defective, I can scan it and just immediately know like all the steps all along the way that like made it defective, basically, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And you can proactively look for items that have similar suspicion of fault.
what what I'm really trying to get at is I think on a human level, like these systems are developed the way they are not because it doesn't make sense to keep track of every individual transformation on every individual thing, but because it completely overloads your mind to think about that when you're trying to build something as a person who's buying a bunch of parts to assemble them into something. Like I have needs that are met by categories of goods and not individual goods. And I'm like, I'm always going to look for people to fulfill that contract in exactly that way. And that's probably the reason the accounting systems work the way they do now is because like my inventory is describing what pieces I would put in all the machines that I use to assemble stuff. It's not describing the individual items that I would slot in, right? It's describing what role they fill.
Are you saying that the incumbent systems are the way they are because it was too hard to think about it any other way?
It's like I want to get a contract with you going, right? Like I want you to provide me stuff. I'm like the very most that I would ever deliver to you as a supplier is a blueprint, right?
No, not even that. A certificate. If that. that would be the minimum amount would be a quality certificate that said it is what it is.
Oh, that's what the supplier is providing to the consumer, right?
No, to the manufacturer.
what the consumer is providing to the supplier is like, it's not, I want this exact specific individual thing. It's like, I want something that fills this role.
Right.
I don't know. I just think that like,
I think a way to explain this, Tom, in a numbers way where people would see that there's a huge advantage to using a system like this is that you're offloading quality to the blockchain. And so now your quality system is more immutable and on the blockchain and being tracked and auditable than ever before. And that's an extremely valuable and time
But why is it
saving.
Like why is it valuable? Because it costs time.
Because you want it, because you're always constantly trying to drive quality out of your process without sacrificing quality. Because quality is expensive, extremely expensive, and if you can drive it out of the process and make it where it's just kind of like in the background, like the cosmic background radiation of quality is around your business, and it's always there, and it's something that you can't escape, and so therefore it's built in. Then it's the cheapest quality system you can ever have.
Just because you track every individual item doesn't guarantee you that they're going to be of good quality.
Yes and no. There's ways to drive out quality in your structure and ensure that it's still a quality product. There's ways to do it. Like it's a bit more complicated than just saying you just drive it out. But I mean, if organizations already capture every nut and bolt down to the washer of their systems, if they're using SAP, they do that, right? They know how long it takes someone to hit a hammer on a table. They tracked it down to that little tiny variable. So saying to them that now you can take all this information and upload it to a virtual factory that is now going to help make sure that your quality system is running properly is a huge cost savings for anybody. Massive, like hundreds of millions of dollars for certain factories.
Okay, so here's a problem, right? Like obviously we're doing this first job as like a case study so that we can sell it to lots of other people. How do you the effort required to transition a company from non-fungible accounting to from fungible accounting seems too high, and personally I don't want to do it because it sounds like
don't know if I agree with that statement yet.
Okay, well, I don't want to do it because it's too much work.
Right. That's more agreeable. Yeah, I can understand that. I'm just saying that the information's already in the system. It's a matter of migration. So
right. Okay. So the problem becomes if this other company, which is just setting up basically they're a licensee company. They've got the licenses for Australasia. They want to use the licenses in another jurisdiction. So they know the order quantities, they know the sizes, but they get to set up the whole process is like from scratch, which you sort of never get to do all that often. Once this system is set up and run, how can you draw a cost comparison between fungible accounting and non-fungible, given that this operation would never have had fungible accounting at any point in time?
You probably have to run that experiment somewhere. Because you don't have a control. That's what you're asking for. You need a control study.
There's no control. So how, we can't go into a company and say, yay, blockchain. Like no one. I need to know how to calculate the value. That's what.
Okay, so like if you want to compare two things, where one is like a more information dense, extended version of the other one, you have to have some sort of operation on your model where it's lossy, where you lose the information of the enriched information system, and then show that the non-enriched, like the fuzzy system, the one that's more coarse grained, maps cleanly onto the system that they have.
Okay, so we can list out operations that are not possible in a fuzzy system. So you can say, well, you can't do those operations, so you have to remove them.
Right. So in these accounting systems that they use right now, serial numbers are like almost a side effect, right? Like they have an inventory that counts the number of pieces that you're going to put into the thing, and the number of pieces that you have in the back room in the box, right? Like somebody scans serial numbers at some point and makes sure that they're all entered into the system. But when you do your operations of building stuff, you you grab a piece from the box and you put the piece in the thing, right?
Yep.
So here, sorry, I'm trying to work this out. I probably am a little slow and fuzzy.
That's right.
In the enriched version, you grab a specific piece from the box that has a specific provenance, right?
Right.
And then you put it in the specific machine that has a specific identity. So
who maintains the specificity of those items? Do I have a tool with me, like a phone, and I have to scan it?
Well, that stuff's on the blockchain, right? So you have to have some.
You moved it from the box in the warehouse. You then installed it in this machine. I need. Sure, we can design the system to take some assumptions about. Look, we know there were only 12 things in this box, so the chance that it was this one equals blah blah blah, and we can sort of recover data from deduction and probability. But I'm just asking, how do we present, you're asking for people to do more work in a lot of cases to track individual things.
Who's the one that's scanning?
No?
Yeah, who's the one that's scanning the serial number? When you receive the box from your supplier full of the pieces, somebody is scanning the serial number. Even though the accounting system says there's 12 widgets in this box, there's some line in the accounting system somewhere that says this widget has this serial number, this widget has this serial number, right? When I go to consume that from the box, when I'm interacting with SAP, I drop 12 down to 11, right?
Yeah.
That's the one moment where you would have to add an extra step. You would have to find the serial number of the thing you removed and scan it. And if you could do that, if you could have that one moment in there, you would be able to have the enriched, fully transparent version of the supply chain in your database. I'm assuming
a very easy operation to do, because you could design a system so that when you scanned it, just scanning it was indicating that it had been removed. So you'd scan widget, scan machine, and then you're together.
Right. Now, that's assuming everything is a machine that you assemble by bolting pieces onto other pieces. There's other operations like CNC milling a batch of screws or something like that. That's not nearly as clear or coherent of an operation to track. But at least for things that are assembled out of other things, you could probably prove this point out pretty easily. Because like you said, scan the thing you're taking out of the box, scan the thing you're putting it into. Okay. That's beep, beep, and now you have a version of provenance across the entire supply chain.
I guess the way I was planning on integrating it into factories that didn't have any kind of notion, like a towel factory in Pakistan, a lot of them don't have individual tracking of items. Right, we want them to generate these 2D codes, sew them into the care labels, and then I figured if you could scan it with all you need is just a simple scanner, and you can be compatible with our system. So it's basically making a super cheap way for them to onboard the information.
Right. And then it's actually, once you have that information, it's actually really easy to model the old system versus the new system. Because all you would do is drop all of the instance information out of your model and only use the metadata, only use the this is a towel information.
Yeah. Okay, well,
how do we build it?
Another way to approach this information is the information density that Ben was referring to earlier. So what we're doing is the system before SAP would have been a linear barcode scan, a 1D scanner, right?
Yep.
That was like the bee's knees back in the day when it first came out. You could track inventory that way. Yay! You could do something with it on a computer somewhere in a spreadsheet. That's awesome. And then SAP came around, and then we got two-dimensional product tracking, which was a little bit more information dense. So, but now we want to take it to the blockchain, where we're going to a third dimension of information density. So,
we don't have three.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So, I mean, we're basically we got three-dimensional barcode scanning now. So, that's the way I see it. Where we're just if the more information that you can have about your business and tracking and the immutability of it all, the more you are in tune with what's happening, and therefore you have a better quality system.
Right, but there's a flaw there where the cost of the tracking outweighs the.
I don't think that's. I don't think I would push back on that. I don't think I don't think it's any more expensive and maybe even more cheaper than the current system that they're using.
Okay.
Having set these systems up, they're extremely expensive to set up, but once they're running, they're extremely cheap to run. It's always the setup cost. This really is. And all the political battles that happen inside the company when they set this up. No, I want to be the one that leads it. No, I want to be the one that does this. Those are the things that usually kill these projects is the politics more than the actual whatever tool it is that you want to onboard as your ERP system.
Okay, well, I guess we're very lucky that it's green fields here then.
Right. I mean, if you're able to approach these with companies that are startups and say, hey, you want a cheap system? Like, hey, you're a medical device manufacturer startup. Here's a system that only costs you a couple $100 to get up and go, and you have a quality system built in and this and that. Then we want
to charge by object. We don't want to charge by system.
Yeah, no, but that's way cheaper than the current thing where it's a subscription and you have to pay us $3,000, $4,000 a month to use a subscription. It's like if I'm a struggling medical device manufacturer and I'm only making 10 widgets a month right now just to get demo product out the door, and I'm only paying for 10 products to do with all this blockchain technology, then hey, great, awesome, and it scales with me. So the more orders I get, I just have to pay for what I'm making, right? I don't have to pay for overhead of some system that I put together and I spent 8 months building up and getting ready, and then I still haven't sold anything yet, right? That's the worst case scenario. So, I mean, yeah, there's a cost savings there as well, just from that model, for the fact that you're only paying per object rather than paying a subscription, for a system you may or may not be using yet, but you need it. You need it, but you don't.
Right.
But you don't know how much yet because you're not selling anything.
Part of the value proposition is that if you use our mainnet, we're basically your SaaS provider. Like we will handle all the IT problems. We'll look after the data for you, hold it securely, all that. You can sort of use it like a web app, even though it is your data, and you can keep copies of it and run it offline and all that.
Right. So, I mean, if they decide that they want to spend the infrastructure and run it themselves, then so be it, right? I mean, if they have the technical know-how and they know how to set it up and they can run their own server, then they're allowed to fork it. I don't care. But they would still have to have that upfront cost, where they buy the servers and hire the personnel and get the developers to write the code, and you know what I mean. So yeah, of course they would want to go with the system that's already pre-built.
Okay.
And
I mean, I'm not hearing any objections to this system. It sounds like it would be beneficial.
There's another way you could approach getting money for it too. I'm assuming that like provenance, like high fidelity provenance, would be mostly regarded by business people as a way of mitigating risk, which means you could sell it as insurance.
Or better yet, sell the service of insurance on top of it. Like if you use this system, we will give you access to liability insurance on a per object basis.
Yeah. It's just when companies are thinking of because like I'm saying, I think provenance only really matters in cases of exceptions, which means it's all about risk management, right?
Yep.
I'm not sure if that's entirely true. I think a lot of people are coming around to where provenance is now key to a lot of things, even where cotton comes from, and I mean, like there's just like I think more and more consumers are getting switched on and forcing suppliers and
I guess
businesses to conform to this.
That's absolutely the.
I mean, BlackRock, the leading $1 trillion company or whatever, the huge conglomerate, is forcing companies to do this, regardless if they want to do it or not. You know?
So that's the gamble that we're taking, and is that the systems you currently have in place cannot fulfill that, and we're trying to get an early lead by making a system that can be built out over time to do all the things you do now with this high fidelity non-fungibility built in.
If it was possible as a consumer, I would love to make sure that absolutely every step of the thing that made my goods was vegan. I'm a pretty like militant vegan in that way, right? I think that's a good end state for the model. But I also think that as a sales pitch, walking up to these people and saying, scan this barcode at one moment in time and your insurance rate goes in half, is like a pretty good sales pitch.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of what I'm getting at, where I want to sell services as software. So the software acts like the marketplace, and it's sort of very close to free, and then it's the services where we make money on.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically can provide a piece of software that's superior to what they have now and costs nothing to get started, plus it's open source and you're free and blah, 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 blah. And then it's the services that pay for the software development.
I'm going to post something in general so you guys can read it, that we're not the first people to think about this. So BlackRock, which is like the largest fund manager in the world, is forcing companies to comply with ESG. So everything about your system now has to comply with some way with environmental sustainability or sociability or something. It can't just be, let's go mine this rock till there's no more left and then, screw whoever lives there. Kind of just, I mean, so if you want money from these guys, you have to comply with their standards now. And
that's kind of fun.
Yeah, so I mean, this is going to take blockchain. This is our client right here, BlackRock. Like, this is the company that really needs this kind of system to track all their investments and who they're giving money to, and making sure that their suppliers conform with the sort of, these sort of mandates. Do
you think that these?
Sorry, go.
I think you might need a blockchain to prove that it's actually cheaper to do it this way than any other way. Like, that's the thing. I think probably complying with all these extra dimensions in order to get money seems like a huge pain in the ass and an extra cost. But I think with a blockchain, you could prove that it's actually cheaper to think about sustainability and environment and good governance and all that kind of stuff.
Well, just being a good corporate citizen is probably cheaper because you're not always in lawsuits and,
Right. It's making other companies conform to like a protocol almost of like good behavior and transparency and correcting their own mistakes rather than like taking it out of band and spending forever in a court and needing to find new suppliers and wasting the inventory you have and on and on and on and on, right?
Okay, well, I guess I'd take this BlackRock thing as evidence that the assumptions that I said at the start of the call are reasonable things to invest in or invest towards.
It's not just reasonable; it's expected now. ESG is everywhere. Even in cryptocurrency now, ESG is everywhere. Like certain people won't invest in certain Bitcoin mining operations unless they're ESG compliant. Like it's pervasive, man.
So basically,
I mean, that was one of my ideas, is to have an ESG compliant Bitcoin mining operation in Rotorua, just using volcanic power.
Right. So making the non-fungible accounting system and pitching it towards a way to do ESG integration that's super cheap instead of having layers and layers of complicated systems and processes.
Right.
And
that's right.
Bolting on a services marketplace to help you migrate and come into compliance and make sure that other aspects of the business are being done in a way that lets you drive the cost of that down rather than up.
Right.
Because
That's right.
if you've all got this standard way of accounting, then you can have services that do these exotic types of operations more fungibly.
Well, and then somebody can come along and write an app that says, "Hey, by the way, if you're ESG compliant and you're selling medical devices, here's something that helps you become FDA compliant."
Yeah, right.
Okay. Or ISO compliant, or I want to build airplanes, so therefore you're FAA compliant.
Okay. Okay, cool. Well, now.
Has any is there a spec for the NFAs anywhere yet?
Which NFAs?
Right. So they're still in that state, hey?
I've asked for that too.
It's okay. No, I mean, I know specs are horrendous. I've written too many specs. I don't like specs.
Well, we don't know. We don't know is the answer. We're trying to what we're trying to do right now is specify NFAs for the construction of the key components that we want done in scenario format. So trying to be as open-ended or as pure problem as we can. Right, because the problem we're having is that the NFA started to become dictator, sort of top-down control, whereas they're supposed to be an invitation to solve a problem, as opposed to you must solve it this way.
Right.
The more freedom you have to solve it in any way, the better the quality of solutions we'll get.
Well, I mean, we can still say what the NFAs that we need, though, right? We don't have to keep that open-ended.
Well, we've tried. That's actually kind of hard. I mean, you guys are welcome to have a crack at it, but even that's proving problematic. We're still going on it.
Well, does there have to be one standard then? Why does this have to be one?
It's not even a standard. It's a content problem. The NFAs only really need the description in a way that can be fulfilled. What are they to be? What should they be? That's the problem.
They have some number of operations on them as well, right? You can do things to NFAs.
Are you talking about the NFAs required for us right now to build our system? Or are you talking about the NFAs as in an NFA object? What is the interface to it?
Both, I think.
Yeah, I would say probably more the latter. What we using the concept of NFA in the supply chain conversation here, that's the one I'm referring to right now.
I don't have a spec. I want to just play with it because I'm not sure that I understand object-oriented programming enough to be able to say, the object-oriented programming I've been taught and have applied for the past 20 odd years is not genuine objects. It's metaphor objects.
Right.
Are you talking about a new code then? Or is that what we're saying?
No, I'm just saying that every computer system I ever made had an object model of the domain that it was trying to operate in. I've never really made a system that tried to model the real world. It was always a degradation of the real world for the specific purpose. It was narrow.
Yeah, like Tinker Toys, right?
Yeah, and something's different when you go full res. You're I want full res objects. What is the interface to a full res object? Couldn't tell you.
Well, what would be the minimum interface, I suppose?
Create, I suppose. Create and modify any properties. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the more you delve into it, the more these like standard objects start to have properties that I'm unaware of, like what was the chemical composition.
Well, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, why do we care about that specifically right now? Like, why don't we write the interface so that people can just backfill it and fill the NFA up with whatever information they want?
Yeah, that's the plan. That's why there's no spec right now.
Right.
That's why there's no spec, because I don't know.
So bringing this all the way back full circle.
Yep.
Like, there's semantics involved here, right? Different types of things are going to behave differently.
Yes.
Like, there's almost like that kind of derived relationship between different types of objects, where like an animal is less specific than a bear. You know, the classic object-oriented program that they teach you, right?
Yeah.
Like, it strikes me that there ought to be some kind of primitive operations that are like applicable to absolutely every single type of object in the system.
Yes.
Those would be the ones to figure out first. And then I assume there's like a giant web of semantic categories that extend objects with more and more interfaces that we can leave up to everybody else, right?
Are you talking about like an atomic NFA?
Okay. So I think we've blurred NFA and universal object a little bit. I'm not actually sure which is which. Like, I know NFAs were posed as a way of
intended to be a redispersal mechanism for attribution.
Right.
Objects can be anything, including
Right.
NFAs.
So we know objects can live and die and have data inside of them of any type.
And merge.
And they can fork and merge. But what I think
be programmed.
they can fork, they can merge, and I guess they can reference each other, but I don't know if that's just a type of data.
They can connect to each other. They can have strong connections where they're parent-child, and they can have weak connections where they're linked, and they can have loose connections where they're one way. Or
is loose connection like a term for like broadcasting, waiting for a link kind of thing?
It's not a guarantee. It's not a channel. It's not point to point. It's more
a socket.
No, sockets are point to point.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, look, I don't
mean, it sounds like you just described a spec to me. So.
Well, sure. It's definitely not enough. I just wanted to begin making the system and then tinker with it while we figure out what it needs to do, because it seems very different to the accounting systems I've made in the past.
What I'm wondering is if you could freeze like the basic spec a little bit, and I guess kind of like come to an agreement on it for now, and then start to consider whether there's an idea where you can equip objects with other types of interfaces that would let them do more things in a standardized way later. Like, is there, in object-oriented programming, there's the object class at the very middle, which doesn't really do a lot of shit. It's like, I can be made and I can be unmade, right?
Yep.
And then, like, it's built up layer on layer on layer on top of that. Like, I can be, I can send out an event when I'm changed. I can, you know what I mean? I have a strategy inside of me, which is a function that like explains how I would behave according to a standard interface, but like have specific behaviors inside of me that change based on what instance I am. Or I'm a factory. I can make other copies of other objects, right? Like, you equip that stuff like layer after layer after layer on top, right? You have one little thing in the middle that's like very simple, and then you just keep adding interfaces on top of it.
Yeah, I can't fault you there. I just
don't know what I'm saying. It's because I'm not. It's like is there a way, what I'm kind of chasing after in this whole conversation a little bit is there a way to um, like allow extra interfaces to be added to the object in a standardized way? Like, can
I
we
mean,
say that there are types of objects in the world, basically?
yeah, I mean, going back to your bear thing, that's where I was heading with set theory, where all bears are mammals. That's a set. All mammals are animals. That's a set. And you keep going up and up until you get to the more general.
If we're talking about a global, we're talking about making global sets, because as soon as you start wanting to share accounting systems between companies in the supply chain, once you're like compatible with 3 or 4, you're probably compatible with like several thousand, so you're kind of trying to hit the global level of compatibility, and critical to that is going to be allowing multiple simultaneous sets of things, so you can be several things at once, right? Depending on how you look at it, it's almost like you need to lens them so that when I look at it, I'm a it's a bear, but then through this other group, it's a I don't really know much about bears, but
it's a mammal.
You know what I mean? Like the way we need to preserve the freedom of the system so that people can describe the sets in whatever way is comfortable to them without them breaking consensus on this is the thing, right? Like the only restriction we have is like, we are talking about this individual thing. You can adorn it with any information you want. You can call it different things, whatever, so long as we hold the agreement that this is the thing.
That's the atomic object, right? With the handful of things that need to interact with the world, right?
So it's like, like the root of all objects is the thing that you can't disagree on, or the system doesn't work.
Right. So what's the smallest object that we could make that would satisfy that? That's your spec. Even if it's one line of code, it would still be the spec.
The blank blockchain object is all
and the methods that it has.
With what?
And the methods that it has, right? Like create,
because its methods permit it to be upgraded or modified in any way or extended.
Right. And like a covenant or a smart contract or whatever it is really just a way of equipping it with more and more interfaces, right?
Behaviors, but
well,
right now,
a smart contract is just a standard. That's really what that boils down to.
There's no inheritance between covenants right now. And I don't know if that's sort of what you're asking. Like you specify a covenant, and it's one blockchain, one covenant. There's no.
I'm saying that the easiest way for people to agree that this thing, like that we can give it a common treatment, even though we treat it in different ways, is to have a common interface that we both agree on.
Correct.
This is interface-based programming 101, yep. Right? Like if I don't care if this is a map or a bag or a set, if all I want to do is just count through the items in it. Yep. So I would talk to the iCountable interface.
Yep.
And I would lose all the information about bagness or setness or mapness or whatever, right?
Or bareness, yeah.
Or bareness. and the only way you can do that is by having semantic connections between types, right? So like smart contracts would be related to each other with some kind of type semantic interface or semantic web, I guess, right? Like when you equip an object with an interface, it's going to come with all of the things that it's evolved from based on, like all of the things that it subtypes.
Yep.
And then the thing that's common for a good between like where do I put it in the machine versus how do I account for it is probably the least common interface, which in a lot of cases is just going to be object.
How do we model money in the system?
How do you model money? Well, I think
is that money just an object? Like
yeah, but it's
with an interface.
It's a fungible object, so
that's just a consumable, though, right?
So I don't think you have money. I think you have a ledger. There is no such thing as money. There's only a ledger. There's only a place that's keeping track of like accounts and number assignments in the accounts.
Well, I mean, I think the system would think of money just like glue or any other consumable. To be honest, like it doesn't care as long it's just a stack of things that sit over there, and if the things that stack gets lower, then it gets critical, and you have to get more of it, right? It's a consumable.
The most primitive operation that you can do to claim that you're in business is to sell an object for some money.
Right.
And so that money needs to be represented as an object in our system. And we need to not destroy the fungibility of that money, because we need to be able to cheaply meet the KYC and AML requirements that go around it, particularly because this business is going to be doing international trade. Specifically, goods are coming in from Wuxi and Pakistan, and then going to UK and America, and so there's going to be a
Wait, how do you do non-fungible currency?
Non-fungible currency means that, like, as soon as you attach the requirement for KYC and proof of source of funds to the money, it lost its fungibility. But the way we look at it right now in the accounting systems is that we try and turn the money back into fungible as quickly as we can. So we pass the KYC at entrance point and then put it in a pot, mix it up, and now it's all fungible again. But are
you talking about wrapping currency?
Yeah, wrapping the currency. You wrap the currency.
Okay, all right.
You make an object.
I was just trying to figure. Okay, that's where I was getting disconnected, because currency in and of itself is fungible. It's the most fungible thing in the world, but you want to wrap the currency so that it becomes non-fungible, and therefore it's now accountable and immutable.
I want to wrap it as the transaction, where the transaction includes the information about the proof of source of funds, the KYC information.
Right. No, yeah, I get it. Yep. Everything.
Yeah. Okay, so.
But what happens when that money leaves the system?
I think you can keep that information and make money fungible.
Yeah.
Basically, like, all money is a number.
Right.
With a number with a provenance, and then you can do a merge operation. The numbers just add, and the provenance just joins.
Right, but you can get a problem where when money's mixed in the wrong way, bad money pollutes good money. Good money does not cleanse bad money.
If you make a type system for your smart contracts, you could have types of money in the system. Like, you could equip money with a bad money interface or a good money interface based on how it entered the system or how you tagged it or something like that.
Because once you wrap KYC, USD, or whatever currency you're in, then it becomes more valuable.
Right. So So you can wrap it and be like, this is KYC cleared. This is a say $15,000 unit of KYC cleared.
Clean money.
Yeah, this is clean money.
Yeah, you're equipping it with the KYC cleared interface, right?
Yeah.
And then when you merge through a KYC cleared interface and you try to merge with a non-KYC cleared interface, you can't do that operation.
Yeah,
right?
That would dirty the money.
Or if you merge two KYC cleared interfaces, you add the numbers and then you make a cap table out of the provenance data.
Right.
And, this is going to be the same problem. Going back to manufacturing, you're going to have the same issue with nuts and bolts and glue and other consumables in the system. That stuff's going to have to get wrapped as well, because I don't want to have to track every single screw and then scan it. All I want to do is be able to order a bulk set amount, wrap it, and
what
then.
You're asking for is, even though the system has the ability to go to do maximum fidelity, you're asking for the ability to behave as a fungible system whenever you choose, for things like consumables.
Correct.
But fungibility always goes by type, right? Like, it always goes by the interface.
Right. So we can just stop there and not do instancing. No, you do the instance. You get the best of both worlds. Everything always has an instance, but you don't always know it, right? Like, if a box of washers arrives, you're not going to scan each one unless you feel like being cruel to the warehouse guy, right? But
we want the system to get to a place where that box full of washers would have become as an object, where every washer had an identity inside of it.
Yeah, but the introductory world that we're releasing into will not be conformant with that. So
what I'm saying is, like Ben said, at some point that box of washers would have the provenance of a blockchain where I would know where every single washer came from. Right. Now, whether or not as a manufacturer, if I feel like scanning every single washer that I put into an object, that's another story. But the information's there if I need it.
Okay.
And by the way, they do this for airplanes and whatnot. Anything that's mission critical would get everything would be scanned and stamped with their own number. So this is kind of, these systems would be very effective for Boeing and other
it just
manufacturing
seems
facilities.
Overkill for like kitchenware, but the principle's the same. I mean,
I don't know if I think that anything being manufactured now is mission critical in this world. The way it's going, like it's getting to the point where it's almost a priority to know exactly where everything's coming from.
Okay.
You know? I think it's a really good thing to do.
So money in the system wouldn't be treated any different to any other object because you still want the same KYC information attached to your material in your inventory.
Yeah, because that's quality.
And you still want the same basically anti-money laundering information or proof of source of items attached to your physical as well as your
and that's quality too.
Yeah,
okay. It's provenance, right? Like,
yep.
I also really like the idea that when you merge money, you automatically create a cap table from the provenance information.
Yeah.
Like that means money can start cap table. Like you just put money somewhere and it can become a project.
That's a good point. That's like auto seed. Auto seed based on you just put the money in and then the cap table is it's like it is what it is basically. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I think I got enough to sketch out a system.
Next weekend.
And by the way, that whole thing with wrapping money, that becomes a great budgetary item as well.
Well, yeah, because now you can do your budget by forking your production or your instantaneous system, forking it and running like what if on it.
On the second day or third day.
Yep.
Right, like you can model scenarios in the future and have all the logic of the real world things be applied, so you can play with the future in a bit more detail, I guess.
Gotcha, yeah, right.
Okay, so if we can, so basically this accounting system, to be valuable to business, it needs to incorporate wrapping money and tracking the provenance of money, and it also needs to allow you to generate forecasts of where will your objects be in the future based on where they've come from in the past.
Okay, mate, that's all good. Okay, we'll see.
And alerts are very important.
Right, so like standard like triggers for like when this level goes below this, or when this timeline is starting to look, you know, when you right. Okay, so we can model. We can just model that like a bucket, where you're like, you set a bucket alarm. If the bucket goes below the low water mark, you're like, alarm.
Right. You're running low on washers, you better order more. Or automatically orders more depending on how your system is.
Right. So
or you tell Alexa to do it, I don't know. Like
one of the features that I was asked for in the system was to be able to prompt the retailers that they should order more now, because based on their sales data, they're running low.
Right. And the salespeople could maybe even set that to automatic.
Oh, hopefully.
I mean, in a system where if you're running it via blockchain and it's more transparent, they would do it automatically.
Okay.
At some point, they would just say, "Yeah, this system works, and I'm just going to trust it."
Because the calculations we're using are not subject to tamper. Like we're like, this is the forecasting algorithm. If you want a different one, we'll do it for you. But once it's set, we can't really mess with it. So you might as well just use it. Okay. Well, that starts to sound a bit more valuable.
Ultimately, I think what you want to sell this is like here's how much money you save by using it, right?
Well, that was my question. How do I know?
Yeah.
How do I know that?
How do you know that you've saved anything at all?
Yeah.
Well, I think that probably the easiest costs to go after are the costs of like trying to recover from like a catastrophically bad situation that you can't tell who caused it.
Those are the costs that businesses least want to spend money on for some reason.
Really?
Well, they don't. They don't.
Of course. I mean, that's why catastrophic failures happen.
Yeah.
Look at Boeing. Look at anybody. Like,
right, like if an event costs $1 million and it happens once every 5 years, it's really hard to get someone to spend like $100,000 a year to prevent it. They just don't seem to think.
I guess you want the mid cost, like highly frequent things, right?
Yeah, you want to hit the everyday costs because those seem to be more. I don't know why those don't. Those.
Well, it's because it's like driving by and seeing the gas prices. Why did we do that as a human? It's like, why does that matter? We're programmed in for that daily thing. Like that's the most important thing in the day. Where are the gas prices at?
Yeah.
So what's like a mid cost, like highly frequent occurrence that you can fix by keeping better provenance on items in your supply chain? I think shrinkage is probably more common than catastrophic failure.
It's also not that much of a problem, really.
No?
The biggest problem is erratic consumption, and at the consuming end, which is which is what it's the shocks in the supply chain that cost the most.
Right.
Yeah, well, the Six Sigma events that nobody accounts for or forecasts for.
It's like a buyer and a retailer that was sloppy and didn't put their order in time, and now suddenly they want like a huge order, and it rocks the smoothness of the supply chain. You couple that with a factory that has been lying about its available capacity, and your pipe runs dry, and the pipe running dry is catastrophic.
Expensive.
You can get money spent to fix that problem.
Yeah, if you don't order enough iron filings for the cement, you have to shut the cement plant down, and that costs like $2 million a day.
Yeah. So those kinds of things.
Yeah, but like, does that get fixed by individual item level provenance?
Does it though?
It can if it tells you when you need to repair something or maintenance needs to be done in a more accurate fashion.
For the cement plant, yeah. For the
aircraft maintenance, helicopter maintenance, you name it. If I can model a system in blockchain and it would tell me, give me a better gauge as to when things need to, give me alerts as to when things start to, not before they go wrong, but when things need to be looked at, or a repair needs to be done, or a teardown needs to be done on a more timely matter that's more accurate than just setting a schedule. That saves money,
Yeah, you don't need a blockchain for that though.
You do for provenance.
I guess for intercompany supply chain.
I can't model my system on SAP. I can't run it. I can do modeling in a blockchain environment, but I cannot do it in a SAP environment.
It's the modeling aspect though that's the value deliverer. It's not.
The model is a quality system. It's way valuable, man.
I think that any object system would deliver this value. It just so happens that we use blockchain to implement it because that was just a convenience.
No, I don't really agree with that, because blockchain is there's so many caveats around blockchain that make it a more valuable system for provenance than anything else. I can agree with, like,
such as
I don't agree with like Tom down the road telling me that, hey, this diamond definitely came from a mine in New Zealand and not from some blood mine in South Africa. If I had a blockchain,
I could make a fraudulent, like there's GemLab. is the ones that hold the provenance certificates for diamonds. So
right, but well, the bears as well. But I mean, does anybody really believe them? No. No, it's all bullshit because until they were able to put something on blockchain, make it immutable and auditable, so then they can lie, right?
You could argue that there's some sort of a value enhancement in the fact that if multiple suppliers in the supply chain have all asserted a certain piece of information, then it's more likely to be correct.
You could put numbers to that. Even you could say if they assert it and they don't, they're more liable. Like,
yeah, I would only agree with that as if there was something on the line for them to have to do that, like their job or a NASA payout or something. Like their ass would have to be on the line for me to agree with that. If it was on blockchain and they're all saying the same thing at the same time, then yes, I would say the probability of something going wrong is lower, but not zero. Because then I could look on the blockchain to see and audit it and tell me, I could have code running in the background doing automatic quality checks to make sure that things were running smoothly per contracts, per smart contracts, per whatever, per handshake deals, whatever that is. There would be way more higher confidence in a blockchain immutable structure that I can audit than just an SAP system. Because anybody can enter anything in an SAP system. There's, if you have access, you can fudge all kinds of numbers, man.
Right, but
that's another problem because in accounting right now, accounting is extremely, I would say probably the worst industry in terms of honesty of all industries. So, like just look at Enron and other examples, and this sort of creative accounting is still going on. Like, I think accounting is up there with, naked short selling with stock markets.
Some of this value of the system is derived on the fact that once you broadcast the blocks, you can't take it back.
Right.
Whereas an internally operated system is malleable and can be fudged.
Right.
If I make a mistake on the blockchain, it's there for life, and I have to ask to everyone to ignore it.
Right, but how that's actionable in terms of money is almost always like finding the person who's responsible for something and making it whole again, right? Like, I don't know that there's any other way to save money other than like holding people to account. Like, that seems to be the main function of auditing.
Well, I don't know. The main function of auditing is to make sure that you do what you say and you say what you do. It's just like quality. Quality is the same thing, but quality is a more embedded audited system where an auditor, you normally is a third party that comes in and then does the same thing and make sure that you're doing what you say and say what you do.
But like, what happens if you don't?
Well, then you lose your certificate.
Right. So engineering is a little different because you have the certification that lets you do things, but like ultimately that loses you money and the firm money because they don't have an employee and you don't have a paycheck, right?
Well, I mean, this is the same situation. Like, if you want to be ESG compliant, then you better have your certificates in order. You better be on the blockchain. You better be doing this. You better be doing that. What I'm saying is that there's going to be a certification process at some point. We're not probably going to develop it, but we're putting in the infrastructure for someone to develop one that would come around and make sure that you're compliant with certain standards, and and this blockchain would go a long ways to being able to do automated compliance. Like, I could set up tools now where it gives me alerts when certain manufacturers are fucking around.
We do want alerts when we suspect that the supply capacity of one of the factories is either misrepresented or is drooping.
Yeah, sibling alarms, right?
Oh, here's a great example. If you guys, I don't know if you guys are on Twitter or not, but there's a great Twitter account called PeckShield. And PeckShield is a smart contract auditing firm.
Yeah.
And they have automated tools now on blockchain that go out and they can tell you when somebody's done rug pulls or up to shenanigans or whatnot, just based on data on the blockchain. They go, oh, these people have done this, or this contract is extremely vulnerable. You want to pull your funding from this, or this or that, and this could happen.
So,
and it's almost all automated.
Okay, so I mean,
You know?
The reason why I'm asking all these questions is I'm thinking like, what does the sales sheet look like for this product? Is it worth investing in to build it? Because it's not a small thing, and I'm sort of I want to make sure that it's being done for the right reasons. So another value add is the fact that if you have all this high fidelity data, you can do higher order pattern matching to spot things like fraud. Like you could detect someone using child labor from a pattern in comparison to all of your other suppliers versus like, you know, like you're more likely to be able to see it with a pick shield like tool.
Right.
I think
casinos do that.
I think you hit it best first, because like without standardization through the links in the chain, it's impossible for you to swap suppliers like without a tremendous amount of effort. Like imagine a protocol for supplies, basically. Like imagine it was very, very easy for me to like fail over to like another branch on the supply chain.
Yeah, you want failover, so you want to almost virtualize your suppliers so that you can spin up another one that's compatible.
Well, they do that already, by the way.
Yeah, but I'm sure they have to go through a vetting process. You would require less vetting.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
You would require less vetting if you use this system.
Right, so if you were plugged into this protocol, this supply protocol, and you'd passed your audits and all that, then the downstream consumers could flick between you however way they saw fit with much more ease than they can right now, right?
Yeah. I think you'd even see an emergence of a new type of like mass specialization kind of builder of things at the very end of the supply chain that could just assemble random supply chains to create one instance of something. Like that's the goal that I think everybody wants to go towards in manufacturing is, can I create like things to a customer's spec immediately by assembling the supply chain on the fly dynamically?
Yeah, not wrong. Okay, well, shit. I think that's enough to at least sketch out a prototype for.
Cool.
Were there any other questions about anything else related to where we're at?
I don't know, but I realize this topic makes me feel really like awake.
A what? Sorry?
This topic makes me feel really awake and like sparked. I don't know why.
It's pushing those buttons.
You should come and work on it.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Current plan is to convince my wife to work on her thing on the weekends so that I can work on other stuff on the weekends too.
Good luck.
You guys in your negotiations. Jesus.
Okay. Well,
Man.
Is there anything else to add? I should get back to work. Well, not that this is work, but I mean, you know, writing actual code.
I guess, what do you need from us?
This is going to sound really stupid, but I actually don't know right now.
Okay.
I mean, like I don't know, like a sell sheet on why this system would be better or worth switching to. From the point of view of like, you know, we'll get the case study going, but then it's probably gonna. I doubt we'll earn enough revenue from that first customer to pay for what's required to give it the wider suite of features that it would need to make it into more customers. So we probably need to pitch it at some point. I don't know.
Yeah, that's not really super useful until the network effects kick in, right?
It's sort of like not useful, and then it's becomes really useful, but you probably burnt like $2 million worth of development on it. So
can you get a consortium to agree to it?
I'm never doing another consortium.
So just to FYI, you guys may or may not be a bit aware of it, but I went ahead and posted a system that's already similar to what we're talking about. That's already out there. So in general. So.
I'm gonna hunt for the stuff that I've written about the supply chain thing before, Tom. And if I find anything useful, I'll post it.
Yeah, I guess the problem is like making a spec for this system is really difficult because we sort of have to muddle our way through it on the fly. Like non-fungible accounting is tricky because then there's like process flow modeling as well. Like if you're dealing with unique objects, it doesn't make sense to not be able to model the process by which they move.
Well, the process just becomes another NFA.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But now we need like a process modeling tool.
Well, that's why I was getting hung up with merge, because to me, in my mind, if I take an NFA and I put it into a machine that's an NFA and that spits out another NFA, that would be the merged NFA, but you guys are calling it a wrapped NFA. So that's what that would be, the new NFA from that process, whatever happened, because there's labor involved, so that whole bill of materials that happens at that particular step, whatever those processes are, would be the new NFA wrapped with those processes and other information and who worked on it and how much time it took and all that stuff would all be encoded with that information. And then it would move to the next, and that single piece flow would move to the next station, and every single station it worked on would get that particular information attached to it all the way up to where it's being put in a box and a label put on it and it's sent to the retailer.
Okay, well, I mean, let's just keep thinking about what's a much more minimal system that's working. Just sounds a bit heavy, straight off the mark.
Well, like I said,
to capture the entire flow of goods in the economy.
Well, that's what the Fed does, right?
Yeah. No, look, I'm sorry, I don't have a clear direction right now. I just want to get a prototype up and just be like, this is what I think object-based accounting looks like, and then I want to do some scale tests to see, can we actually track 1 million items a month, or does it start to get a bit unwieldy?
No, you can. That's small potatoes, man. 1 million, it would be easy peasy. I think you would start struggling when you start get to more of a billion.
But yeah, we'll see.
So let me know when you end the stream, and I'll talk to you more about what I posted. So.